Daniel Morgan adjusted his cufflinks in the mirrored hallway of their luxurious apartment, a practiced smile tugging at his lips. To anyone who glanced his way, he appeared composed, successful, and effortlessly charming, the very image of a man who had mastered both business and social grace. Yet beneath the polished exterior, Daniel carried a restlessness he rarely admitted to himself. Meetings, calls, and the constant buzz of professional life occupied much of his attention, but they also served as a convenient distraction from the cracks forming in his personal life. Despite his outward charm, there was a selfishness he struggled to conceal, a tendency to prioritize his desires over the subtle needs of those closest to him, particularly his wife. Amelia Grace Morgan moved gracefully through the apartment, her hands resting on her rounded belly as she hummed a gentle tune. At 8 months pregnant, she radiated a serene energy, absorbed in preparations for the arrival of their baby. She arranged tiny clothes in the nursery, folded soft blankets, and placed stuffed animals carefully on the shelves, imagining the first moments she would share with her child. Her world was focused on safety, love, and nurturing, the very life she hoped to build with Daniel. She looked up as Daniel passed by, offering him a warm smile, one that reflected trust and an unspoken hope that he was fully present, both physically and emotionally. Daniel returned the smile, kissed her forehead, and whispered words of affection, masking the emotional distance that had quietly grown between them. Amelia's trust was unwavering. She could not see the hidden tension, nor the secrets that had begun to intertwine with their daily lives. Unbeknownst to Amelia, Daniel's thoughts often wandered elsewhere, drawn to fleeting desires that contrasted sharply with the calm, nurturing life she was crafting. The charm he displayed was a careful facade, a mask that hid temptations, distractions, and choices that could threaten the family they were about to create. In this delicate balance of domestic bliss and unspoken desires, the calm before the storm stretched on, unaware of the betrayal silently taking root just beyond her view. Cassandra Vale moved into the apartment next door with a confidence that turned heads and drew attention effortlessly. Elegant, poised, and striking in appearance, she exuded a charm that was both magnetic and calculated. From the very beginning, she observed her surroundings with a careful, discerning eye, noting the comings and goings of neighbors and the subtle patterns that revealed weaknesses. Among these, Daniel Morgan quickly caught her attention. His polished demeanor and success were obvious, but she was intrigued by the hints of restlessness and subtle dissatisfaction she sensed beneath his charm. Cassandra's approach was never overt, she knew the power of subtlety. She smiled warmly when she greeted Daniel in passing, complimented his achievements casually during brief conversations, and lingered just long enough to spark curiosity without raising suspicion. Her flattery was gentle, wrapped in a guise of friendly conversation, yet each word was carefully chosen to plant seeds of temptation and dissatisfaction. She would casually remark on how demanding Amelia could be, or how much stress Daniel must endure, always framing her suggestions as concern or admiration rather than provocation. Amelia, for her part, saw only the surface. She trusted Cassandra implicitly, welcoming her warmth and friendliness without question. She admired her as a neighbor and occasionally engaged in small talk, never suspecting the subtle manipulations at play. Cassandra's interactions were designed to appear harmless, the kind of neighborly charm that could easily be mistaken for kindness. Meanwhile, Daniel found himself increasingly drawn to Cassandra's attention. Her words and subtle flattery played upon the insecurities he had long ignored, nudging him toward thoughts he had never admitted to himself. In this quiet, almost invisible exchange, Cassandra began weaving a web of influence, setting the stage for tensions and betrayals that Amelia would never see coming until it was far too late. Amelia began to notice small but unsettling changes in Daniel's behavior. The warm smiles and affectionate gestures that had once been constant now came sporadically, replaced by distant glances and curt replies. He lingered late in his office or claimed sudden, urgent meetings that seemed plausible but increasingly coincided with times when he should have been home. Each vague excuse left a gnawing unease in Amelia's chest, though she refused to give it too much weight. She rationalized his behavior as work-related stress, reminding herself that the final weeks of her pregnancy were taxing for both of them and that Daniel had always been ambitious, often putting his career before personal matters. Still, the absence was palpable. Amelia would finish preparing the nursery or fold tiny clothes, only to realize that Daniel's presence, his attention, his shared excitement, was missing. She pressed her hands to her belly and whispered soothing words to her unborn child, attempting to fill the void with her own strength and calm, hoping that her husband's distraction was temporary. Meanwhile, Cassandra Vale continued to operate with quiet precision. She created subtle opportunities to engage Daniel alone, feigning casual interactions that quickly deepened into private conversations. Her compliments became slightly more personal, her concerns about his stress increasingly intimate. Each encounter was designed to make Daniel feel understood in ways Amelia could no longer reach him. Cassandra's manipulation was seamless, almost invisible, and she knew precisely how to plant ideas that encouraged him to drift emotionally from his wife. As days passed, the distance between Amelia and Daniel grew, yet she clung to faith in their bond. Unaware of Cassandra's influence and the growing temptation Daniel faced, Amelia's trust remained steadfast, leaving her vulnerable to the betrayal quietly building around her. Daniel's phone buzzed constantly with messages he kept carefully hidden from Amelia, each one a mixture of flirtation, admiration, and subtle suggestion. The conversations with Cassandra became a private world where he could indulge his restlessness, a space far removed from the demands of home and the growing responsibilities of impending fatherhood. He found himself increasingly drawn to her words, eager for the attention and validation she offered, even as guilt tugged at the edges of his conscience. Meanwhile, Amelia began noticing subtle inconsistencies in Daniel's stories. He would mention meetings that seemed to overlap with errands she knew he hadn't completed, or claim to have been caught up with work calls during times when she had seen him absent. These small discrepancies, though easily dismissed individually, began to pile up in her mind, creating a quiet tension she could not shake. She felt the stirrings of unease but struggled to confront them directly, reminding herself that stress, fatigue, or the pressures of preparing for their child could explain these anomalies. Cassandra, ever cunning, sensed Daniel's wavering loyalty and escalated her influence. She carefully planted the idea that he deserved attention and excitement beyond the confines of his marriage, framing it as an almost natural response to the pressures he faced. Her words were subtle yet persistent, suggesting that his needs were valid and that Amelia could never fully understand the complexities he navigated. The combination of secret communications, Daniel's increasing emotional distance, and Cassandra's strategic manipulation began to erode the trust that had once been the foundation of their marriage. Amelia, despite her attentiveness and love, remained unaware of the full scope of the betrayal quietly unfolding, leaving her vulnerable to the shock and devastation that would soon upend her world. Amelia had gone to the rooftop to retrieve the laundry that Daniel had promised to hang the night before. The evening air was cool against her skin, carrying the faint sounds of the city below. As she stepped onto the rooftop, a chill ran down her spine, not from the wind, but from the sight before her. There, illuminated by the fading golden light of the sun, stood Daniel, pressed close to Cassandra Vale. His hand lingered on hers in a way that made her stomach twist. Cassandra's lips curved into a sly, knowing smile, and Daniel's usual charm was replaced by an awkward mixture of guilt and desire. Time seemed to freeze as Amelia's mind struggled to process the scene. Shock rooted her to the spot, disbelief crashing over her in waves. How could he, her husband, the father of their child, be here, so blatantly betraying her? The world seemed to constrict around her chest, and fear coiled in her stomach, sharp and unforgiving. She could feel her heartbeat hammering in her ears, a mix of panic and raw anger threatening to take control. In that moment, Amelia made a decisive choice. She stepped forward and slammed her hand against the rooftop door, engaging the lock with a force born of both desperation and determination. The click echoed through the empty space, and suddenly Cassandra and Daniel were trapped inside the small rooftop enclosure with her. No excuses, no charm, no manipulations could erase the undeniable truth of what had just occurred. Amelia's voice trembled, but the strength beneath it was undeniable. "Explain this. Now." Her eyes, fierce and unyielding despite the vulnerability of her 8 months pregnant body, bore into Daniel and Cassandra. The weight of the betrayal pressed on them instantly. Daniel shifted uncomfortably, caught in the act, while Cassandra's confident facade wavered. For the first time, Amelia held all the power. In a single, irrevocable act, she had turned the tables, locking the door tight and forcing the truth into the open. The calm that had once characterized her life shattered, replaced by the raw, unrelenting reality of betrayal she would never forget. Amelia stood with her hands firmly on her rounded belly, her body tense but resolute. The rooftop, once a quiet space of solitude, had transformed into a stage of confrontation. Her gaze swept between Daniel and Cassandra, both caught off guard by the sudden firmness in her posture and the fire in her eyes. "Explain this," she demanded again, her voice steady despite the tremor of emotion underneath. The words hung heavy in the air, carrying the weight of betrayal and disbelief. Daniel's eyes widened, panic flashing across his face. He opened his mouth, searching for an excuse, a justification, anything to soften the blow, but the sight of Amelia, so calm yet so powerful in her indignation, rendered him speechless. Cassandra, ever the manipulator, attempted to deflect, her voice silky and persuasive. "Amelia, it's not what it looks like," she began, reaching out with a hand, her smile carefully rehearsed. "Daniel and I were just talking, you know, there's nothing serious." Amelia's sharp gaze cut through the charm like a knife. "Don't," she said, her voice low but commanding. "Do not try to twist this. I see everything." Her chest swelled with protective instinct, the weight of her unborn child amplifying her strength. She refused to be intimidated or placated. "I trusted you, Daniel. I trusted both of you. And yet here you are, blatantly betraying me." Cassandra faltered, her confidence faltering under the intensity of Amelia's confrontation. Daniel shifted uncomfortably, realizing that all attempts at excuses would be futile. Amelia, despite her vulnerable state, projected an authority that neither of them could ignore. She was not just demanding answers, she was reclaiming power. "I will not let either of you compromise my life or my child's," Amelia continued, her voice unwavering. "This ends now. You will answer to me, and you will understand the consequences of your choices." The rooftop felt smaller, the air charged with tension, as the lines of control had been redrawn. Amelia had transformed her shock into decisive action, asserting herself fully and making it clear that she, and her unborn child, were untouchable. Amelia left the rooftop with her mind racing, the adrenaline of confrontation still coursing through her veins. Her hands trembled slightly as she clutched her phone, but her determination was unshakable. She knew she needed guidance, someone who could help her navigate the dangerous territory Daniel and Cassandra had exposed her to. Without hesitation, she dialed Veronica Hayes, a trusted lawyer and family ally whose reputation for discretion and fierce advocacy preceded her. "Amelia," Veronica answered, her voice calm and reassuring, immediately picking up on the tension. Amelia's words poured out in a torrent, brief but precise, recounting the rooftop encounter, the betrayal, and her need for both immediate and long-term protection. Veronica listened carefully, asking targeted questions to gather facts and assess the situation. Her tone shifted subtly, balancing professionalism with empathy, providing Amelia with a sense of steadiness that was sorely needed. Once the initial recounting concluded, Veronica outlined the steps Amelia needed to take. She explained legal avenues to secure financial independence, protect her assets, and ensure the safety of her unborn child. She advised documenting every interaction, preserving evidence of Daniel and Cassandra's betrayal, and implementing safeguards to prevent any interference in Amelia's life. Veronica emphasized the importance of balancing emotional responses with practical action. Anger and hurt were valid, but the priority had to be security, both legal and personal. Amelia took meticulous notes, her mind sharpening as she processed the guidance. She realized that her empowerment required both courage and strategy. Each step Veronica suggested was a tool to reclaim control, contacting trusted allies, reviewing shared finances, setting boundaries with Daniel, and planning for her future as a single, independent mother. By the end of the conversation, Amelia felt a surge of clarity and determination. The emotional turmoil still lingered, but it no longer dictated her actions. With Veronica's guidance, Amelia began crafting a plan, one that would protect her child, and ensure that Daniel and Cassandra would never compromise her life again. She was no longer just reacting, she was preparing to reclaim her power fully. Amelia sat at the dining table, her laptop open and her phone in hand, methodically gathering every piece of evidence that could confirm what she had already seen on the rooftop. Messages between Daniel and Cassandra were carefully saved and time-stamped, photos taken during their encounters were organized and stored securely. She even reached out discreetly to neighbors who might have witnessed suspicious behavior, making notes of their observations without revealing her own plans. Each piece of evidence was another brick in the foundation of her empowerment, ensuring that Daniel's betrayal could no longer be dismissed or denied. Cassandra, who had thrived on manipulation and subtle intimidation, now had no leverage. Amelia's meticulous documentation stripped her of any ability to charm, twist, or gaslight the situation. Every attempt at deflection would meet the unshakable truth Amelia had assembled. The awareness of this power lent Amelia a calm confidence, her anger tempered by clarity and strategy. She was no longer merely reacting to the betrayal, she was preparing to control its consequences. Daniel, meanwhile, could sense the shift. He noticed the careful organization, the steely resolve in Amelia's demeanor, and the evidence accumulating beyond his excuses. For the first time, shame washed over him in waves, mixing with fear and regret. The gravity of his actions hit him fully. There was no charm, no apology, no manipulation that could erase the betrayal he had committed. He realized that Cassandra's influence was fleeting and that Amelia's preparation left him powerless. As Amelia completed the final steps of evidence collection, she felt a surge of determination. The betrayal had been undeniable, but so was her response. With every saved message, every documented photo, and every witness statement, she secured her future, her child's safety, and her own autonomy. Daniel's guilt would be theirs to carry, while Amelia reclaimed control of her life completely. Amelia spent the following days focusing entirely on herself and her unborn child, determined to rebuild the sense of security that Daniel and Cassandra had shattered. She began each morning with gentle stretches recommended for her pregnancy, followed by deep breathing exercises that helped calm the whirlwind of thoughts in her mind. Meals were carefully prepared to nourish both herself and the baby, and she made a point to rest when needed, honoring the physical demands of being 8 months pregnant. Every small act of self-care became a reminder of her resilience and her capacity to protect the life growing inside her. Equally important was her emotional recovery. Amelia allowed herself moments of reflection and even anger, acknowledging the betrayal she had endured. Journaling became a therapeutic outlet, where she poured her thoughts and fears onto the page, transforming chaos into clarity. She reached out to trusted friends for support, but only selectively, ensuring that her confidants respected her privacy and reinforced her strength rather than fueling doubt. Cassandra, sensing Amelia's unwavering resolve, tried subtle methods to regain influence, an overly casual wave in the hallway, a message disguised as friendliness, but Amelia's boundaries were firm. She refused contact entirely, making it clear through her actions and demeanor that manipulation and charm would no longer sway her. With each passing day, Amelia felt her confidence grow. The fear and shock that had once dominated her life were gradually replaced by a clear understanding of her power and independence. She realized that she did not need to rely on Daniel or tolerate betrayal. She was capable of protecting herself and her child, making decisions for their well-being, and forging a life on her own terms. Amelia's inner strength solidified, reinforcing her autonomy and setting the stage for the decisive steps she would soon take to reclaim her life fully. Amelia arranged a quiet meeting with Daniel, choosing a neutral space within their apartment where she could speak without interruptions. She remained calm, her posture composed and her voice steady, masking the storm of emotions that had surged through her in the days following the rooftop confrontation. In her hands, she held the evidence she had meticulously gathered, screenshots of messages, photos from their encounters, and notes from witnesses who had seen Daniel and Cassandra together. Each piece was irrefutable, a testament to the betrayal she had endured. "Daniel," she began, her eyes locking onto his, "I need you to understand the full extent of what has happened." She laid out the evidence methodically, allowing the weight of truth to settle over him. Daniel's face paled as he recognized the depth of his deception, the carefully hidden affair now undeniable. Cassandra's influence, once a looming threat, crumbled under the clarity of Amelia's documentation. Word of Cassandra's manipulation quickly spread through the community, leaving her reputation in ruins. Her attempts at charm and persuasion were exposed for what they truly were, calculated and self-serving. Within days, she was removed entirely from Daniel and Amelia's lives, unable to exert further influence or manipulate the situation. Daniel's shame was immediate and visceral. The realization of how his selfishness and weakness had jeopardized his family struck him with full force. Every excuse, every fleeting justification, felt hollow in the face of the truth Amelia presented so confidently. Amelia, meanwhile, maintained complete control. She spoke with authority, made decisions regarding boundaries and safety, and projected a strength that left Daniel powerless to resist or argue. In that moment, the balance of power shifted irrevocably. Amelia was no longer the vulnerable, trusting wife. She was a decisive force, commanding respect and establishing the terms of her life. Daniel's regret would remain with him, but Amelia's control and independence had been firmly, undeniably restored. Amelia's labor began quietly in the early hours of the morning, a calm contrast to the chaos that had filled the weeks before. She had already arranged everything with Veronica's help, her hospital paperwork, her support team, and her safe environment, completely separate from Daniel's presence or interference. When the contractions intensified, she breathed through them with a strength she had rediscovered within herself. By the time she reached the hospital, she felt prepared, emotionally and mentally, to welcome her child into a life free from fear and manipulation. Surrounded by compassionate nurses and a trusted midwife, Amelia focused entirely on the new beginning unfolding. Hours later, she brought a healthy baby into the world, a tiny, perfect child whose first cry felt like a promise of healing and hope. Tears streamed down her face as she held her baby close, marveling at the small fingers curling instinctively around her own. In that moment, she felt an overwhelming rush of love and certainty. She had made the right choices. She had protected her child from a toxic environment before they even took their first breath. In the days that followed, Amelia settled into her role as a mother with surprising ease. Her apartment became a sanctuary, peaceful, warm, and filled with gentle routines that centered around her newborn. She thrived in her independence, finding strength in every feeding, every late-night lullaby, every quiet moment where she watched her baby sleep. With Veronica's continued support, Amelia completed the legal steps needed to secure full autonomy, ensuring that Daniel's influence remained minimal and heavily supervised. He no longer held emotional or practical power over her life. Daniel, faced with the consequences of his betrayal, watched from a distance as Amelia flourished without him. He realized too late that the family he had taken for granted was now beyond his reach. Amelia, however, felt no bitterness, only relief. Her life had transformed into something steady and self-directed, anchored by her child and her own resilience. She moved forward each day with purpose, embracing motherhood and independence as the foundations of a future she had built on her own terms. Amelia stepped into her new life with a quiet determination that surprised even her. What had once felt like a world collapsing around her now unfolded into something steady, clear, and full of possibility. The apartment she chose was modest but warm, filled with sunlight and small touches that reflected her newfound independence, fresh flowers on the table, soft blankets folded neatly for her baby, and walls free from the shadows of betrayal. Every morning brought a sense of peace she had never known while living under Daniel's distracted, wandering gaze. Her days took on a gentle rhythm. She focused on caring for her newborn, building a routine that revolved around love rather than fear. Each feeding, each nap, each tiny milestone reminded her of the strength she had cultivated. She no longer apologized for needing space or boundaries, she owned them. And with every step she took, her confidence grew, solidifying the foundation of the life she was determined to create. Cassandra had vanished from the neighborhood shortly after Amelia's confrontation. Her web of flirtation and manipulation disintegrated the moment her facade was exposed. No more smirks in passing, no more whispered insinuations, only silence where once there had been threat and deceit. Amelia didn't waste another moment thinking about her. The woman was simply gone, swept out of their lives like dust from an open window. Daniel, on the other hand, lingered in the background, wrestling with the consequences he had created. The rooftop incident had stripped him of the illusion of control and charm he once relied on. Friends distanced themselves. Neighbors whispered. And at night, when he was finally alone, he was forced to confront the painful truth: he had destroyed the family that had stood loyally beside him. Amelia no longer held anger, only distance. She refused to grant him space in the life she was rebuilding. In this new beginning, Amelia learned to breathe again. She laughed more, slept better, and found joy in the smallest achievements. Her heart healed slowly, strengthened by the child she held close and the freedom she had fought for. He sought passion on the rooftop, she whispered one evening as she rocked her baby to sleep, but I locked the door and reclaimed my life, my child, and my dignity.
And that wraps up today's story. Now we want to hear from you. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments, and let's see how far these stories reach. If this story moved you or gave you chills, give it a like, share, and subscribe for more powerful stories. One last thing, rate the story from 1 to 10 in the comments. Your feedback helps us bring you even better ones next time. Thanks for watching. We appreciate you being part of this storytelling journey.